Welcome to the Guilty Gear Strive Simple Mesh Modding Tutorial Guide. I'll be guiding you through the process of how to make simple edits onto a character's mesh and how to effectively put that in game. In order to demonstrate this, I'll be making one of my cat ears mods. Brand new, you get to see the process. Aren't you a little excited? First thing we're going to want to do is to open up UModel. I'm assuming you already know how to use UModel if you've started on any palette mods. If not, then Ultima's video will teach you. But I'm just going to speed run through this a little bit, explaining some stuff along the way when necessary. Alright, so for this cat ears mod I'm going to be using Anji. And as you can see, Anji has his head and head high. I'm going to want to grab both of those for this mod and export them as a GLTF mesh, just like as you would export it to preview meshes in Blender. The most important thing to do with mesh edits, however, is to also export these things as a PSK file. I'll come back to that in just a small bit. But you want to make sure that you do both of those exports. Not only that, but I'm also going to grab Anji's normal set of textures because I will be doing some UV editing as I'm making this mod. So once I have all those, I'm going to go and get Noesis. Now, Noesis is not found in the Strive resources channel, and as such, I will provide a link to a Noesis download in the description of this video. But if you're going to be making mesh edits, you're going to want that. When you open Noesis, you're going to be greeted with a file browser, and you're going to want to use that to navigate down the file path to wherever you have saved the models. In this case, it's saved in the UModel export folder in the same file path that it's found in the game. I'm going to see, I've already exported these, but what you're going to want to do is take these Anji head PSKs that you've found, select Autodesk FBX when exporting, and you're going to want to type FBX new export space rotate 90 0 0. That lets the exporter know how you're going to want to do this, and it's going to create a new file when you do. Once again, I've already exported these, so I'm not going to create a separate file, but essentially what this does is it spits out a FBX file of what that PSK file was. Once you have both of those, it's time to open Blender. Once you're in Blender, go ahead and create a new file and import that GLTF mesh just like you would any other one. Important thing to do when creating mesh mods, in fact, is take this PSK, make sure to drop that down, and go ahead and get rid of the armature. Because what we're going to do next is import the FBX we have. It's going to be stored in the same file location as where the GLTF is. Just make sure to select FBX import in your import options and not GLTF. And you're going to want to make sure I selected export. Oopsie daisy. You're going to want to make sure that the FBX you are importing matches up with the GLTF that you did import. As you can see here, it says Anji head, so I'm going to want to make sure I grab Anji head out, not head high. This is mainly because of the animations tied to the skeletons. As we put these back in game, we're going to do a little playing around with the skeletons. but the skeletons paired to the armatures have to match the skeletons originally in game, or else things start to get a little complicated. The main thing is, though, is that you don't want to see Anji's low poly head during his high poly head animations. Once we have the FBX in here, we're going to go over to the file browser and go ahead and select all these mesh areas and just delete them. We don't need them, because we're going to select the mesh coming in from the GLTF and control click the armature. Make sure to select the mesh, then the armature. Mouse over to the model viewer window and hit Control P on your keyboard and select Object Keep Transform. That sets these objects together, parents them to make sure that everything moves correctly. If you have the Arc System Work tools for Blender, they are very helpful. I recommend them. You can actually find them over in the Strive Resources channel. If I scroll down here, it's going to be right here. The Arc System Works tools. I do recommend downloading them. They make using Blender when doing this kind of stuff a lot better. What we're going to want to do is click Set Armature Bones to Front. Of course, we should select the armature that we're doing before we set Armature Bones to Front. That puts it in wireframe view and makes it so that that huge bone isn't too obtrusive. One thing I should mention is that you should never, ever, ever click the Clear Junk Materials button. As you can see, it says it removes the shadow and outline mesh, which is something we very, very much want to keep when we're doing a mesh import. If I pop into rendered view here, you can see that shadow mesh is that green thing, and that right there is the outline mesh, that pink cube at the bottom. You're going to want to make sure that those stay in the game. Now, if they don't, there are ways to fix it, and I will go over ways to fix that later. But the main thing to know is that if there are no assigned faces to these two materials, then they will not show up in Unreal Engine, and it will break the material outline settings for the model. Anyways, a way to get around having to see this horrid green sphere is to simply select the outline or the shadow material and click the H key on your keyboard to hide it. Now this hides it only in edit mode, not in object mode, but we don't really care about object mode that much, if I'm going to be completely honest. The next step in creating a mod like this is to, of course, model the edits that you're making, whether you're, say, removing his ears or giving him more hair, making his glasses bigger. All of these things are things you can do, and if you want to, go ahead. The more mods, the better. Some of them could be funny, some of them could be serious, but who the hell knows, really? Unfortunately, I'm not going to show you me modeling cat ears, simply because I've already modeled them in the past. A little secret to my mods is that I just have a file of the same cat ears that I've modeled, and I just place them on characters over and over again. As you can see here, it imported, and I just slid it up a little bit, and these are the cat ears that I use. Now, I'm not going to bore you having you watch me positioning these cat ears and making them all look nice, so I'm going to speed up this footage just a little bit to make it less boring. You can listen to some nice music while you're watching me do this. you're wondering what I'm doing right now, I'm a little worried that this cat ear clipping through that piece of hair would be a problem demonstrating it in game. Now, I don't know, or quite frankly, I can't recall which side of Anji's head is displayed in the game, so I'm wondering if that's very visible to the player. If you give me a moment, I'm actually going to pull up Anji's dust loop page so I can double check that. Alright. Doesn't look like it's going to be too much of a problem, given how that hair moves in-game. It's usually seated a lot lower than that, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next step. Now, that next step would be actually to make sure... First, I'm going to apply the mirror modifier, or else there'll only be one cat ear on him. And now the next step is to make sure that this MI main base material is gone, because it will create some problems when joining the two meshes together. And speaking of joining the two meshes together, that's what I'm about to do. I'm going to select the cat ears first, and then the mesh for Anji head second, and I'm going to mouse over to the model viewer window and hit Control J. That joins the two meshes together. Now they are selected as one, and if I hit edit mode, they all go together. I'm going to double check that those cat ears got assigned to MI main base, and yes, they did. That is wonderful. So the next step is to make sure I have the UV set. And in order to do this, I'm going to be setting up the Arc System Works material recreation for Blender. Now, if you know how to do this, then don't worry, just skip ahead a little bit in the video. But if you don't, just watch. Hey there guys, Future Cat Scrum here. If you're unfamiliar with what I'm talking about, you can download the Blender Arc System Works shader from the Strive Resources channel. It is a normal blend file that you use to append your current blend file with. When you do download it, make sure you save it in a memorable location because you're going to be using this often. I also talk about the Arc System Work Tools add-on for Blender. You can also find that in the Strive Resources channel. Just install that like you would any other Blender add-on. I'm going to be appending my file with that saved shader I have. I'm going to go into Material and select Decal Damage and Strive Arc System Works. I'm selecting Decal Damage because Anji's head does have a decal mesh on it, and I just like looking at the mesh in its entirety and not having to worry about faces that look weird. Append this file, and I'm going to set the MI main base material to Strive Arc System Works and Decal to Decal Damage. Now, if I zoom in and open up the shader editor, sorry model, you're not getting seen right now. I'm going to open and navigate down to where I saved those textures that I extracted earlier. Anji Costume 1 Material, Color 1, Anji Base. I'm just going to keep going down the line. The SSS. The ILM, which is not saved in the color folder and is saved in the base folder. ILM, and make sure you set that color space to linear or else it's not going to look right. And the detail, which is also saved in the base folder. Now, we see part of Anji in his full glory, since the shadow mesh is still here. But you can see his hair, rather the ear tufts on the hair, are already a wacky little color. I don't think they should be that color, so we're going to fix that. First, I'm going to do the same thing I just did with Decal Damage. Decal is saved in the, I don't remember what folder, so we'll see together, shall we? It's in the color folder. And make sure to also set this color space to linear, or else it won't look right. And speaking of looking right, Anji looks a little washed out, doesn't he? Something kind of weird. Well, that's because we don't have our color management settings in Blender set right. We're going to mouse over to the Render Properties tab, which looks like a little TV, and set the color management down here. View Transform should be standard and not filmic. Look at that. Look how much brighter he is. Isn't that wonderful? Now, Anji, let's see what you look like. Ah, superb. Stupendous. This is stupid dialogue. Why am I saying this? Anyway, I'm gonna... Come on. There we go. I'm gonna go over to the UV editor and make sure that Anji base is there. Now, something that is very useful, and why I recommend the Arc System Works tools, is these alpha on and alpha off buttons. This displays Anji's base texture file with the alpha channel. If I simply select alpha off, then would you look at that? I can see everything. Now, I'm going to want to take a look at where these ears are, especially those hair tufts. So I'm going to take a look there, click that button, and I can see that both ears are there, and if I highlight them in the window, they show up here. And these ear tufts are located down here. I wonder why they're down there. I surely don't know myself. It probably had something to do when I saved the file. But we're going to go ahead and move those. We're going to set them up here originally, somewhere I can actually decipher where they are, and then decide what to do with them later. The first thing I'm going to do is double check something on Anji's file with these ears. This button right here, I've been pressing UV sync selection. It's very, very important that you toggle that on and off while you're doing these edits. Say if I wanted to only select this, let's change it to face view mode, only select these faces on Anji's hair. I can see that they are somewhere. They're certainly somewhere. Well, they're somewhere on this. And I only want to move these around. Oh, look at that. There they are. Now, that might pose an issue, especially if your selections aren't synced properly. Now, in order to move only a certain area without touching the other ones, you're going to want to turn off sync selection. That way, this area that we have selected here on the model is still shown on the texture. And from there, we can do anything freely we want with it. This button makes sure that any area that we do have selected here only shows up in the texture viewer. It's very handy when trying to isolate certain parts of a mesh. Now I'm going to keep toggling this on and off, so I would say try to keep up, but I'm going a little slow, so you can probably keep up pretty easy. I'm going to do a double check of something here. I'm going to go over and switch the texture to Anji's ILM file and go ahead and turn the alpha back on so I can see all the strange things about this. If you've watched Ultima's video, he explained some details about the ILM file, but the most important thing to talk about when selecting UVs is that the alpha of the ILM channel, the alpha channel of the ILM texture, dictates these areas of hard shading, I should say. Now, if I go and place these ears somewhat over one of these things, let's give it that kind of jagged thing. If I go here, you can see that jagged shading all across Anji's ears. And you're only going to see that if the alpha is currently set to on. If it's off, you don't see it, and you might get a little confused about why you chuck something in the game, and there's these horrid lines all over the place. That's because you have to always double check the ILM if you're doing any sort of texture work. But based on this ILM, I like where these ears are. I was just double checking some things. And now we're going to go back to the base file. Now with this base file, I'm going to turn the alpha back off, turn sync selection back on, and collapse that because it's too intrusive. And I want to do something with these hair tufts. I'm trying to think about what would be good. So usually I place them in an area of whiteness, just a nice color offset to someone's monotonous hair color. Usually I put it right over here under this white area, which is actually the whites of the character's eyes on their head high model, not on the head low. That's what this is for. But I'm thinking about it because we also have this area where Anji's eyelashes are stored, which might be a fun experiment. And we also have the area where Anji's eyebrows are stored. Never mind, it's the head low. They're in the same place as the hair. God. Alrighty. You might be wondering what some of these things are, like this huge circular area. That is Anji's glasses, and that actually does not use this texture. The faces are still there, but it actually uses, not that one, Anji's decal texture, in which this gray area indicates a transparency layer. Now that we have all that and sorted, I'm gonna figure out a spot to put these. Could put them here, make it, ooh, I quite like that. Maybe. It's not normally where I find a spot where I like to put it on the first try, but that was pretty nice. That was pretty nice. What if I move it over to the left a little more and see if I can get more of that gradient in there? Ooh. Do I like the lighter or the darker better? I don't know. I quite like the lighter better, which is very, very nice. I think I'm going to stick with that, unless, of course, the white looks pretty good, in which, let me shrink that down. And, I don't know. I like that red better. So, Anji's ear tufts are going to be this nice dark red. How do you like that? I think it looks pretty good. Hey guys, Future Cat Scrum here. When I finally released this mod, I ultimately decided to change the area of the UV assignment for the ear tufts away from Anji's eyelashes and towards the color of the butterfly on his hairband. This is because the color of his eyelashes do not change in between color picks in-game, and it overall looked disgusting on every color besides color 1. Now we're going to just push that off to the side and make sure to turn the alpha back on to double check that I put it in a good spot, and to triple check, yes, you should always triple check things like this. The area of the ILM looks clean. Alrighty. Back here, close that, bada boom. That's it, Anji's head low is done. Now I still have to do the head high, but before I do that, I still have to tell you about a couple things. The first thing is once you've selected the mesh, now the original Anji head mesh, you're gonna have to go into this wrench looking thing for the modifiers, and we have a modifier called armature. You're going to want to set that to the armature that came with the FBX. That makes sure that Blender knows that that mesh and armature belong together. If you don't set that, it will cause problems for you down the line because the armature doesn't actually line up with the mesh. This lets Blender know to sync the two together and not treat them as two separate objects. You don't have to apply anything, only make sure that this modifier is set. Now before I take off and do the head high, I'm going to show you what happens when you delete the shadow mesh. Now, shadow mesh isn't too important. I just tell you not to get rid of it just to prevent you having to use workarounds like this in the future. I'm going to press Alt-H to display the shadow mesh once again. Select the shadow mesh, and I'm just going to hit a funny key called X and delete the shadow vertices. Now, if I decide to export the FBX like this now, then when I import it into Unreal Engine, it's not going to have MI main shadow under the materials section. Now, if you're wondering what that means, I'll talk about it later, but you need all of these materials under the materials section. Now, technically, you can leave decal as decal damage, and Strive Arc System Works, that's MI main base. You can leave it as that. I prefer not to, but just so you know, in the future, name doesn't matter, only the position that they are on the materials list. So the first one should always be MI main base, or whatever you have it named. Second, shadow. Third, outline. Fourth, decal. Now this is only specific to Anji. Other characters have other materials, or they have it in a different order. I'm looking at you, Ramlethal. Her material order is very, very weird. So if you ever don't have a shadow mesh, you come out of here, say, wait a minute, I don't see the shadow mesh. I must have deleted it instead of hiding it. It's a very easy fix. You don't actually need to have the circle around the person's head, as the shadow is automatically calculated by the game to determine what parts of the mesh should it cast a shadow upon. Not only that, but the shadow is only used in the character select screen, so it really doesn't matter at all. Even so, if I kept the original one, the new character shadow would still have cat ears, which is very cool. If this ever happens, go ahead and select some face on the character. I'm going to choose one on Anji's forehead. I'm going to hit Shift D to create a duplicate and right click to deselect it. I'm then going to go to this material and assign that face to MI main shadow. I like to hit it multiple times just to be sure. I'm going to hit G of Y in order to sync that down into Anji's face. Hello? Hey, future me, cut this part out of me wondering what the hell's going on. Oh, I see. I'm going to sync that down into Anji's face, and as you can see, it's right there. If I select MI main shadow, there it is. And now we don't have to worry about it because that material has an assigned face. Now, I'm just gonna go ahead and export this. I'm not gonna go ahead and export this. I'm not done. I lied. The next thing we have to do is make sure I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I'm excited that I'm actually recording this. I'm going to make sure that these are assigned to the correct vertex group. Any new additions to a mesh have to be assigned to a vertex group somewhere on the character's skeleton for it to actually move in game. If it doesn't, it'll hang around in the air and look pretty bad as it stays stationary while the rest of the mesh moves. What I like to do is to assign these things to a bone group called G hair base. It's this one right here. And if I select it, as you can see, those ears do not select. Now I'm wondering what armature group it is assigned to, so I'm going to pop this open, select the item tab, and if I'm clicking on vertices, nothing's appearing down here, and that tells me that they're not assigned to any vertex group. Now there is an underside to these ear tufts, and to make selecting that easier, I'm going to select them in the UV editor. which is very handy if you're ever trying to select an area of the mesh and you just can't quite get the angle, even with X-ray mode. Go ahead and go into the UV editor. Makes it a bit easier. Now with only those selected, I'm going to click on the G-Hair Base Vertex group and hit Assign. And now once I've done that, if I select a vertex here, you can see that G-Hair Base shows up as an active vertex group. And if I select the entire thing, the ears show up. So look at that. Now there is a couple more things we have to do. I'm not going to get into using weight paint mode during this section. That is a fancy way to adjust how things move in vertexes. But for the purpose of CAD or mods, full movement with this vertex group is perfectly fine. I'm going to go into edit mode, and I'm going to only select the interiors of each ear. If you're wondering how I'm selecting all this at once, it's because I'm hitting the L key while hovering my cursor over a vertex, and that essentially enters group selection mode. That selects everything within the same group, and the same group in this case is the entirety of the inside of the ear, because the outside was inside. The outside was modeled, then the inside, then the tufts. After I select that, I'm going to go into Vertex Paint mode and select the Vertex Color Master tool. Now, in order to make things a little easier in Vertex Paint mode, I suggest changing the material back to MI Main Base and MI Main Decal. That makes it so that you can actually see the vertex painting on the model. Now, what I like to do, or rather, not what I like to do, what you should do first is select this alpha channel isolator and make sure that you have the brush set to a value of 0.5, fill with value, and apply changes. I'm going to provide a more in-depth explanation of vertex colors at a... I'll just do it now. So the vertex color channels control a lot of different things about the mesh, and we actually have a guide on this in the Strive resources channel. It's all the way at the bottom here, in-depth texture and vertex paint function breakdown. Now doing this actually shows you a very nice guide, and I actually don't know who put... There we go. Actually pulls up a very nice guide on what each of the textures do and the channels that are used by the ILM file. If you're ever wondering about this file, go ahead and go into here. But the most important thing is right here, Vertex Paint. As you can see, the red channel stores threshold and shading values. So if you look on Anji's model right here, you can see that this side of his face has a red coloring. Now, this is because his eyes are a bit hooded, so anything underneath this is going to be shaded just a tad. The blue channel of Vertex Paint stores outline depth info and makes sure that his hair actually shows up as individual pieces and not as one big old blob. This defines the areas that should have an outline, even though they are not edge parts of a mesh. As you can see in this document, the example provided is Chip's hair. This is Chip's hair normally on this side, and this side is with the ends of his hair painted with the blue vertex channel. And as you can see, even though they're not strictly parts of the exterior edge of the mesh, they are given an outline because of the blue vertex channel. And the final vertex channel main color is green. The green channel shades things. So essentially, The green channel is kind of hard to explain, actually. We don't know exactly what all it does. We know that it's move specific. As you can see, part of Anji's hair back here is green. And essentially is once something reaches a certain depth on screen, say, actually, I'll just show the example in the guide. Soul's leg is always behind him. And so because it reached a certain screen depth, it became shaded, as it should be. In this example, they removed that Vertex painting on Soul's legs. So Soul's, that band around his leg became unshaded. Green channel Vertex paint is very nice, but we're not going to touch it. What I just touched is the Vertex Alpha channel, and it is very important as it stores the outline size. Now, if I left it at 0.1, the outline would be pretty big around the ears, and you can actually see that on a lot of my earlier cat ears mods. But after about 3 or 4 mods in, I realized that I should be painting the vertexes, and all the outlines now fit with the rest of the character outline. Now, after I painted the alpha channel, the next thing I'm going to do is, if you remember what I just said, paint the red channel. Quick quiz, what does the red channel do? I hope you were listening. If you said the Vertex red channel stores outline depth info, then you are wrong. I'm sorry. The correct answer is it stores depth shading info. That's the green channel. I lied. The red channel stores regular shading value. Anything 0.5 or below is always shaded. So what I'm going to do is isolate the red channel, fill it with a value of 0.5, and apply those changes. Now, what this is going to do in game is make sure that the interior of the ears are always shaded. And you can actually see that reflection if I go and put this thing back on. As you can see, the inside of the ears are now a much darker tone than the outside of the ears. And I think that looks pretty nice. Now that we're all done with head low, what I'm going to do is go ahead and export this. File. No, that's the wrong thing. You're going to want to select the mesh, Control-click, select the armature, make sure you have them both, make sure you're in object mode. Go ahead and export as an FBX. Going to want to save that to wherever you want. I have an exported FBX folder, and I'm going to make a new folder. Cat Anji. You're going to want to select selected objects. That's going to be your 2 selected mesh and armatures up here. And make sure that you only are exporting the mesh and the armature from this selection. You're going to want to turn off bake animation if any animations are present in this file. And you're going to want to turn off add leaf bones, because Blender will automatically link together bones that are a little too far apart. Go ahead and name it. I'm going to name it the same as the file found in game, ANJ_head. And that's that. That's head low. I'm going to do a quick speed run of head high, and then when I come back, we'll cover how to treat these things in Unreal Engine. Alrighty, coming back to demonstrate that the usual route of assigning the ears to G head or G hair base is not going to work in this application, mainly because G hair base only dictates this little piece of hair, which is very interesting. So in order to compensate for that, I'm going to go with the next best thing, which first off, I'm going to remove these from the G hair base Vertex group, or else they will still show up. and go ahead and assign them to gHeadDef. gHeadDef defines all of the same areas that gHairBase defined on the previous head model, and so it'll work better. You're gonna have to make a lot of these types of edits when you do mesh mods, a lot of these on-the-fly things, but you can work around them. And as you saw, because I took the ears from the previous one, they are already vertex painted, so I don't have to worry about any of that. Make sure the armature modifier is set, and the UVs for this thing should also be set because both head models use the same Onji texture, and once again, because I took them from the one I just did. That'll simplify things, make it a little easier. So select that, select the armature, export as an FBX. Because it is a new Blender project, I have to set the options again. It's again selected objects, only the armature and mesh. Do not bake animation, do not add leaf bones, and this is going to be ANJ head high. Alright, now that that's all done, let's get rid of Blender and go into the very fun part. Unreal Engine! Hey there guys, Future Cat Scrum here again, just to say that in the video I forgot to mention that in order to make mesh mods, you need to have Aaron's custom Unreal Engine version. You can find the download link to this in the Strive resources page. And the reason behind why you need it is quite complicated, but it ultimately boils down to outlines and materials will not display correctly in-game if you use the original Unreal Engine you download from Epic Games. So now that Unreal Engine is open, I like to make a new Unreal project for every single mod that I do. So that's what I'm going to do. You're going to create a new Unreal project. Make sure you select Game, blank, with no starter content, and name it whatever you want. I'm going to name it Cat ANJ. Create project. Let everything load up, and I do not like how it automatically starts Steam VR. Close, please. All right. Now, just the same as any other mod, you're going to want to create that file path. Start with content, Kara, ANJ in all caps, costume 01, mesh, and that is where we're going to put our files. And navigate to where you saved those files, and let's do them one at a time just to make sure we got them right. Now the options that you're going to want to select for these things are very specific, and I know the previous video covering making mesh mods did them in the wrong way. From what I understand, I'm not hating, I'm not throwing shade. This is just what I've been told from the modding community. Now you're going to want to import the mesh, and you're going to want to import the skeletal mesh. Don't touch any of this quite yet. You're going to want to set the normal input method to import normals and the generation method to built-in. Do not compute weighted normals, and do not create physics assets. You can create a physics asset, but you'll just delete it later, so I like to just not create one, period. Make sure that all of these are good. All right, materials, search location, do not search, do not create new materials, and do not import textures. That is just in case you left the textures in on the Blender material. And all that is okay, import all. Now a warning message did show up, but this is the normal warning message that no smoothing group has been found. You can ignore that. If only that error message pops up, you're golden. I'm going to import the other Onji head into here, and make sure that you set this to default, or else when you import it, it will use the head low skeleton. So click that yellow arrow there for it to generate its own skeleton. And bada bing, bada boom, we did them both correctly. Now for the outline material index. The first thing you're going to want to notice is that this is the low head, the one that I did the shadow thing on. But because it had an assigned face in Blender, it still appears here. So you're going to want to take these, go down into the LOD info, this one actually, open up the sections. This will tell you if any material is chunked or not. There are no chunked materials, so you don't have to worry about it. But open up the LOD info section, go to the outline material index, and add as many slots as there are materials. In this case, there's 4 materials, so I'm going to want 4 slots. For MI main base, you're going to want to assign this a positive integer. It's going to be good to assign that as just 1. Now for the outline, you're going to want to assign that to -2. You don't want to assign that anything other than -2. And for the shadow and decal materials, as well as anything not base or outline, you're going to want to assign that a value of -1. Technically, it can be any negative integer, but it's good to just stick with -1. Hit save, and then move on to the next one. Now this one has a lot more materials than last time, just to be sure. Base, outline, shadow, decal, glow, and unique B. That is the material used for Anji's classes. Once again, no materials are chunked, and it looks like there are 6 materials here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Base, outline, shadow, decal, glow, unique B. Anything that's not outline or base, once again, gets a -1. Go ahead and save that. Hit save all, and then cook content for Windows. Now, once I'm back here, I'm going to go into my UnrealPak folder, which you likely already have. If you don't, once again, it is in the Strive Resources channel right here, UnrealPak. And from what I'm aware of, Ultima updated that recently to include the Unreal Unpack function that can be found right here. You're not going to really use that unless you're taking apart other people's mods, just to look at how they did some things. Feel free to look at any of my Cat Ears mods to see how I did some things, especially things like Cat Ears Jacko or Cat Ears Testament. Those are the ones that I did the most work on out of all of them. So if you want to see how I did some things, how I played around with certain settings, go ahead. But what you're going to want to do is create a brand new folder. Name it whatever you want. Once again, I'm naming mine Cat ANJ, capital A, please. Go in here, create that folder, red. And I'm going to open up a new window to go into my Unreal Projects folder. Cat Anji, saved, cooked, Windows no editor, Cat Anji, and copy the entire content folder. Once it's in there, just like as you would any mod, go ahead and delete those shader archives. But something special we do for mesh mods is to go in here and delete the skeletons. Now you might be wondering why we're deleting the skeletons, why we even put them in the mesh in the first place if we're just going to get rid of them. But that's just to assign the mesh to the skeleton, to tell Unreal Engine that they have a skeleton tied to them. You see, ArcSys does their skeletons in a very funny way, and if we don't also cook the skeletons in a funny way, then it won't work in game. What's going to happen is, in this case, if I don't delete this, Anji's head will not appear. He'll have an invisible head, which is very, very funny. If you want to create an invisible head mod for someone, just do that. Just leave the skeleton file in there. But if you want the head to actually appear, if I want Anji to actually have cat ears, I need to delete his skeleton file. And this is so that when the game is patched from this mod, it uses the skeleton from the original game. So go ahead, get rid of that. And once that is done, go ahead and pack that up with compression. Now I'm going to throw this into game, and I'll be right back to demonstrate the cool mod. So now that we're in here, we're going to mouse all the way over to Anji, and would you look at that? Anji. I don't think I've ever heard the announcer say his name. Well, whatever. Just because I like to, I'm going to change the stage to Jellyfish Skyrarium. And I don't know, who should I have him fight? Why, of course, the love of his life, Biken. Look at that. What a funny cat ears guy. Anyway, that's how you create a simple mesh mod for Guilty Gear Strive. I hope you guys enjoyed and actually learned something from this.